You've been doing it all wrong. Every text you send, every story you post, every time you show up uninvited to prove you exist, you're actually making yourself invisible. Here's the psychological paradox nobody tells you. The more available you are, the less valuable you become. Think about it, the people you chase the hardest, they barely notice you. But that person who disappeared for 6 months and came back transformed, suddenly everyone wants to know their secret. Scarcity creates desire. This isn't manipulation, it's human psychology. When you go ghost, when you withdraw your constant presence and validation, you trigger something primal in the people around you. They start to wonder. They start to notice the empty space where you used to be. And in that silence, something shifts. Today we're going to explore why disappearing might be the most powerful thing you ever do for your self-respect, and why your absence speaks louder than your words ever could. The scarcity trap. Let's start with a principle that governs almost every human interaction, yet most people never realize it's happening. It's called the scarcity principle, and it explains why we want what we can't have. Psychologist Robert Cialdini documented this in his research on persuasion. When something becomes rare or unavailable, its perceived value skyrockets. This isn't just about objects. It applies to people. Think about your own behavior. When someone is always available, always responding immediately, always eager to please, how do you perceive them? Be honest. There's a subtle decrease in respect, isn't there? Not because they're bad people, but because their constant availability signals something to your subconscious. They have nothing better to do. Now flip it. That friend who takes days to respond, who's impossible to pin down for plans, who seems to have a life overflowing with priorities. We want what we cannot have, and we value what is rare. You find yourself working harder to maintain that connection. You value their time more. This is the trap most people fall into. They give away their presence so freely that it becomes worthless. But what happens when you reverse this dynamic? Validation addiction. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Most people don't realize they are addicted to external validation. Every notification, every like, every response to a message, these trigger dopamine hits in your brain identical to what addicts experience. Social psychologist Matthew Lieberman's research revealed that social rejection activates the same brain regions as physical pain. So what do? We constantly seek reassurance that we're accepted. We overshare, over-explain, over-pursue. And this desperation, it's visible. People can sense when you need their approval more than they need yours. It creates an invisible power imbalance that poisons every interaction. The person seeking validation becomes subordinate. The person being pursued becomes dominant. If you're constantly texting first, constantly checking if they saw your story, constantly available at their convenience, you've already lost. Not the relationship necessarily, but something more important. You've lost the respect that comes from self-sufficiency. If this pattern sounds familiar, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring these psychological patterns with me, because understanding this is just the beginning. Going ghost isn't about playing games. It's about breaking this addiction cycle entirely. The absence effect. There's a reason why absence makes the heart grow fonder, and it's not just a cliché. When you remove yourself from someone's life, you create what psychologists call an open loop. The human brain despises incomplete patterns. It will obsess over unanswered questions, unresolved situations, unexplained disappearances. Mystery creates obsession. Think about the people who haunt your thoughts. They're usually not the ones who gave you everything, they're the ones who left you wondering. When you go ghost, you create this psychological tension. People who barely noticed you before suddenly find themselves thinking about you. What happened to them? Are they okay? Are they thriving without me? Did I do something wrong? This isn't cruelty, it's simply what happens when you stop being a constant, predictable presence. You become a question instead of an answer, and questions demand attention in ways that answers never do. The key insight here is that your presence has been so reliable, so constant, that people forgot to value it. Your absence reminds them. It forces them to confront what your presence actually meant, and often they realize it meant more than they acknowledged. Power dynamics. Every relationship has an underlying power dynamic, whether we want to admit it or not. The person who needs the relationship less has more power. This isn't manipulation, it's basic social psychology. When you're always available, always initiating, always accommodating, you signal that the relationship matters more to you than to them. And something shifts in how they treat you. Not necessarily consciously, but they stop putting in effort. They take your presence for granted. They respond when it's convenient. The one who cares less controls the relationship. Going ghost resets this entire dynamic. Suddenly, you're not predictable. Suddenly, they can't assume you'll always be there. Suddenly, they have to invest effort to maintain the connection. Recalibration. What you're really doing is forcing a recalibration of the relationship's value. People who used to respond in hours now respond in minutes. People who canceled plans now prioritize you. Not because you've changed who you are, but because your behavior finally communicates what you should have been communicating all along, that your time and presence have worth, and you won't give them away for free. Silent growth. Here's what most people miss about going ghost. It's not primarily about affecting others. It's about what happens to you in that silence. When you stop performing for an audience, something profound occurs. You finally have space to hear your own thoughts. You discover what you actually want versus what you've been conditioned to want. Growth requires silence, and transformation demands solitude. There's a reason every major religious tradition emphasizes periods of withdrawal. Jesus in the desert, Buddha under the Bodhi tree, monks in monasteries. They understood that constant social engagement fragments the self. You become a collection of responses to others rather than a whole person. Silence builds strength. When you go ghost, you get to work on yourself without the pressure of being watched. You can fail privately. You can explore without judgment. You can become someone new without having to explain the transformation in real time. And when you eventually return, if you return, people don't just notice the physical changes. They sense something deeper, a groundedness, a self-assurance that only comes from having done the inner work in solitude. The return effect. The most powerful part of going ghost isn't the disappearance, it's the return. But here's what separates a meaningless absence from a transformative one. You must actually change. Coming back, the same person you left achieves nothing. People can sense authenticity versus performance. If you ghost to manipulate and come back unchanged, they'll see through it immediately. But if you use that time to genuinely evolve, to develop new skills, new perspectives, new depth, the return becomes magnetic. There's a psychological phenomenon called the peak end rule. People judge experiences primarily by their most intense moments and their endings. Your departure was the peak. Your return is the end. If you come back transformed, that becomes the narrative people remember. Not the person who was always around, but the person who disappeared and returned as something more. This is why celebrities go off the grid before major comebacks, why artists retreat before releasing their best work, why the most respected people in any field have periods of deliberate invisibility. The return isn't just noticed, it's celebrated, but only if the transformation is real. Respect vs. like. There's a crucial distinction most people never understand. Being liked and being respected are not the same thing. And tragically, the behaviors that make people like you often destroy their respect for you. People pleasers are liked. They are convenient, agreeable, easy to be around. But are they respected? Rarely, because respect requires the possibility of rejection. It requires boundaries. It requires the willingness to be disliked. When you always say yes, your yes means nothing. Going ghost is the ultimate boundary. It says, my time, my energy, my presence, these are not unlimited resources available at your convenience. People may not remember what you said, but they will remember how you made them feel. When you're always available, people feel comfortable. When you're scarce, they feel something else, a mix of curiosity, concern, and crucially, respect. They start treating you differently, not because you demanded it, but because your behavior communicated that you demanded of yourself. Boundaries equal respect. This is why the people who are hardest to access often receive the most respect. Not because they're playing hard to get, but because their behavior signals genuine self-value. Strategic silence. Let's talk about the practical application of strategic silence. This isn't about disappearing forever or playing manipulation games. It's about intentional withdrawal that serves your growth and redefines your relationships. The first rule: silence amplifies your last impression. Whatever you were doing before you went ghost becomes your legacy. If you were complaining, needy, and desperate, that's what people will remember and expect when you return. If you were working hard, improving, and self-sufficient, that's the narrative your absence reinforces. Choose your exit carefully. The second rule: use the time genuinely. Read the books you've been postponing. Build the skills you've been avoiding. Face the internal work you've been running from. 1. Set a specific time frame for your ghost period. 2. Define clear personal goals to achieve. 3. Minimize social media consumption completely. 4. Journal your thoughts and growth daily. 5. Return only when you've genuinely transformed. The third rule: when you return, let your transformation speak for itself. Don't announce your changes, demonstrate them. The most powerful comeback is the one that doesn't need to be explained. People will notice, and they'll respect you for not seeking their validation about it. Fear of missing out. Here's the obstacle that stops most people from going ghost. Fear. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of missing out. Fear that if they stop reaching out, no one will reach in. Terror. And this fear is real. When you go ghost, some people won't notice. Some relationships will die. Some connections you thought were solid will evaporate like they never existed. But here's the truth nobody wants to hear: those connections were already dead. You were just performing life support. Going ghost doesn't kill relationships, it reveals which ones were already corpses. The people who truly value you will reach out. They'll wonder where you went. They'll make effort. And the people who don't, sometimes the trash takes itself out. You've just received valuable information about who actually belongs in your life. The fear of missing out is really the fear of facing this truth. We keep showing up, keep performing, keep overinvesting because we're terrified of discovering how few people would notice if we stopped. But that discovery, it's freedom. It's the beginning of building relationships based on mutual value rather than your desperate availability. Becoming whole. Here's where everything we've discussed converges into something deeper. Going ghost isn't really about other people's perception of you. It's about your perception of yourself. When you can be alone without feeling lonely, when your sense of worth isn't tied to notifications and validations, when your presence becomes a gift you choose to give rather than a compulsion you can't control, you've achieved something rare. You've become whole. The respect others give you then is just a reflection of the respect you've cultivated for yourself. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole, independent of external validation. Whole people attract respect. People can sense wholeness. They're drawn to it because it's rare and because it represents something they want for themselves. When you stop needing their validation, paradoxically, they want to give it to you more. This is the ultimate secret behind why people respect you more once you go ghost. It's not your absence they respect. It's your presence with yourself. You've demonstrated the one thing most people never achieve. You've proven you can stand alone. And that, more than anything else, commands respect in a world of people desperate to be seen. So now you understand. The moment you stop chasing validation and disappear to work on yourself in silence, you trigger something primal in human psychology. Scarcity creates desire. Your absence speaks louder than your words ever could. But remember, this isn't about manipulation. It's about reclaiming yourself. It's about breaking the addiction to external validation and discovering that your worth was never dependent on how quickly someone texts back or how many likes your post receives. The greatest thing in the world is to know how to belong to oneself. When you go ghost, you're not running away from people, you're running toward yourself. And when you return, transformed and whole, the respect you receive isn't given to you. You earned it. If you made it this far, comment Ghost Protocol if you're ready to disappear and do the work. Welcome to the Psyche Project. If this shifted something in you, hit subscribe. Understanding yourself is the work of a lifetime. See you in the next video.